Good morning, Chris. Quarter way through the century.
Good. Wow. Wow. Now that you say it that way, that just makes you look old. Really.
Happy New Year. How was your holiday?
Happy New Year to you, man. I had a great holiday. How was yours? What did you do? Did you make it to 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve?
Not even close. Here's my holiday in a clip.
How much do you weigh, Ross? I prefer not to answer that right now. I'm still carrying a little holiday weight.
That's
I
me.
did, yeah, I did consume my weight in cookies. I ate a lot of holiday cookies. Anthony, today just you and I, back to the good old days. No expert guests, just
hey, just no experts. We don't need any of those people.
That's exactly right. We're here talking about co-founders and particularly finding the right co-founder. So for the book, we're going to talk about co-founders that are brothers that didn't even have to look for co-founders. The Wright brothers faced the impossibility of building a plane that actually soared. After repeated crash landings, they realized synergy trumpeted solo efforts. Their joint genius gave us modern aviation, proving the right co-founder is the ultimate lift your venture needs. Anthony, let's talk about co-founders this morning. Why is finding synergy? First of all, what defines synergy? Why is finding synergistic relationship with co-founders so critically important?
Well, so first of all, we probably should be answering the question: should you get a co-founder? That's the first question. The second question is, how do you make that work, right? And so I find my co-founder relationships have been the best and the worst relationships I've ever had. It can be incredibly motivating to have somebody there with you. I mean, Chris, we co-founded a podcast together.
That's right.
We're co-founders.
We're co-founders, and we haven't murdered each other once. I mean, I had to recall the hitman that was in.
Yeah, you and a bunch of other people. But yeah, so we decided to co-found this. So let's talk about why, right? So why should you have a co-founder and why shouldn't you? I think you have great co-founder stories too. We've talked about it in the past. So co-founders can help you stay motivated, which I think is the most important aspect to it. So you have somebody there that's in it with you that is holding you accountable to the things you promised to do. You have somebody to impress, like somebody that's in it. Like I find when I have a win, I can come and say, "Hey, Chris, guess who we got for the podcast?" And it's fun. It's fun to share the wins. And employees you can't share a win with an employee because, like, yeah, great, you put more money in your pocket. Not that we're putting money in our pocket with the podcast, but in general, great, we have another couple $100 to spend this month.
Right, exactly.
So you have somebody there, and then also I think those are the most important things. The thing that everybody talks about is balancing of skill sets and strengths. So one co-founder may be good at sales, the other co-founder may be good at the tech or the product, and then you also have the EOS notion of having a visionary and integrator. All of those balancing of strengths and weaknesses and skill sets and experiences are great reasons to have co-founders. However, Chris, why don't you talk about the downside?
Oh man, it's because you have to deal with humans is the downside.
Yeah.
I was trying to quickly find the stat. I should have done it before the episode, but there is a statistic out there that shows, I think it's from the Kauffman Foundation. It shows that uh, any startup is more likely to succeed if you have a second founder and a third founder. And then
Mm.
it's actually having three co-founders is the ideal number of founders because it can break ties, etc. But anything more than three co-founders, it starts to get really messy. So first and foremost, having a co-founder increases your likelihood of success, at least according to that study that I can't seem to find. But 87% of statistics are made up in the moment anyway. So the downside of co-founders is things change and people change and what you want to get out of the company changes along the way. And when you sit down and you start a company, you're completely aligned. And then there's this notion of co-founder drift. You start to drift one direction. This is what you want out of the company. This is what you want out of your life. And your co-founder goes someplace different. And it can create tremendous amounts of stress on a relationship that is really difficult to get out of. The joke that I always say, and when I talk to business law classes, is it's easier to get divorced on paper, Anthony, on paper, than it is to dissolve a company because there's
or to split up co-founders. Yeah, it absolutely is. It's funny that you say startups with co-founders have a higher likelihood of success, but a vast majority of startups that fail due to co-founder conflict.
Yeah, that's a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, I think both are true. And you talked about I think I'm gonna call BS on you for a second here and say when you sit down and start a company, your visions are aligned. I think that's not true.
Yeah,
I think
that's right. You think your visions are aligned just because it's so exciting. You're so
it's the
excited.
honeymoon phase, right? It literally, almost literally, it's almost like a marriage, and it's the honeymoon phase. We're gonna get into this together. We're gonna hammer this out. We're gonna knock out. You're gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. It's all gonna be hunky dory, and it's not.
Right.
It's almost. The first obstacle is really your biggest test. Like when you hit something where you disagree, is typically where you can kind of forecast the rest of the company's relationship with that co-founder just on your very first strong, true disagreement.
Yeah, or really challenging time within the company. When things get stressful, it's when you can start to actually see what it's going to be like to co-found a company. You can't do that when things are all hunky-dory, to your point. It's really difficult to understand how that's going to go and how you're going to react too. Okay, so here's where I think that, we could go down and continue down to find or whether or not it's important to have a co-founder. I think that the answer is yes. I think that the answer almost universally is having a co-founder is great if you can find the right co-founder. And so I think that the heart of this conversation needs to be around that. Like, where do we find, first of all, who is the right co-founder for me? How do I go about doing that? And then what is the vetting relationship that we go through to make sure that that person is the right person to be sitting with me? So first of all, talk to me about some of the companies you found in the past and about how those co-founder relationships came to be.
All the successful companies that I started with a co-founder. So my data point of one, it is true that a co-founder has a higher likelihood of success. And I got lucky because I didn't go out searching for a co-founder. Somebody came to me and said, why don't we start this thing? And we started that thing, and then we started something else. And we started something else. So I've had kind of one or two, three co-founders, and in different ventures, and just got really lucky that I just happened upon them. They were friends already. We understood our strengths and weaknesses and moved forward with it. But I've also helped a lot of co-founders and founders that are looking for co-founders. And I think the first rule of thumb that you need to have when looking for a co-founder is, what are you bringing to the table? is it an idea? Because that's not enough, right? So how many times have you heard, Chris, I'm looking for a technical co-founder?
Oh
Because
my
I have
God.
this, I have this idea that I need somebody to build it. And then it's like, okay, so what are you bringing?
Right.
What,
Yeah.
what are you bringing?
I'm the people person. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that can that the people person can matter deeply, but you have to put yourself in I think this is a great rule of thumb in any co-founder relationship, is you have to have the ability to put yourself in their shoes and ask why you.
Right. Which is
right.
I mean, what you're asking is a level of sophistication that most humans don't have, which is the ability just to move out of themselves for a moment and say, okay, what's actually happening here? What's the real dynamics of this relationship? All right, so you got lucky.
I
You
totally
had
agree.
somebody that you trusted and that you already had some relationship with along the way. As you got going, what were the elements of the relationship that were most important? So you said one, which is complementary skills. It doesn't make any sense, I don't think, to co-found a company with a person with the same set of skills. It is the exact same thing. Is that fair?
Even identical twins have differences, right? So there can be a ton of overlap and still have success. And actually, you could even say, if there's a ton of overlap, there's a lot of alignment already built in. But if there's a lot of work to do, one can say, I'm going to go do this, and the other can say they're going to go do that. So at the very least, you need to have an understanding of who's going to do what. Even if it's like, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm not strong at it, but I'm going to take this on and I'm going to own it. So you need to have a common understanding of who owns what, I think, is the second piece. So one is, well, I mean, you said the first thing is you need to have a good diversity of skill sets. And I'm saying, no, what you need is a good understanding of who does what. And hopefully the person that's doing the thing has some background or strength, or treats that as a craft and goes and gets good at it. So fundamentally, I think the thing is trust.
I think that's dead right. I think you cannot have a co-founder relationship without trust. And the moment the trust is eroded is the time when co-founder relationships really cease to be productive.
I'm gonna give a story on that, and I'm gonna try to keep it as anonymous as I can. So I was talking to a co-founder, a founder that who started a very large company, and brought somebody on, 2 years in, and treated that person as a co-founder, gave him percentages, gave him a lot of responsibility, listened to this person, and has been working with this person for years, and has established trust with this had what he thought was trust with this person, even though a lot of his employees were telling him, you can't trust this person. Right. There's something off about him, this, that, and the other. He just fundamentally had trust. And then that person went behind his back and did something that helped him, but hurt the co-founder, hurt the founder. Like, this person went in and tried to position himself to an investor in a positive way and position the founder of the company in a negative way. You do that one, you have one shot at that. You have one shot at eroding trust, and it's over. Now this person's like, I'm done. Right. He's like, once you lose that trust, once you lose the ability to trust that this person has your back, almost to the extent, not over their own back, right? But they have to value the team more than the individual. I think that is so that's trust, but that's also this value system that it says, together we're going to go further than I am on my own. And if you have somebody that me on my own, I need to worry about number one first, then the team, you have the wrong co-founder. And I don't know, Chris, how do you interview for that? How do you know that without being in battle with them?
I mean, I think it's incredibly difficult. I think that this is something where I think you'll probably disagree with me, but I like to work with people that have played some sort of a team sport, that have been involved in a team, not an individual sport, in like tennis or golf or whatever it's like that, because it is such a team mentality. And one of the things that is true within any team, and I just played high school sports, maybe a little bit of college, but not, nothing, very high level like professional. But one of the team mentality things is that it's okay for you and I to disagree, but we're together. We're a team, and we're going to go out and face this, whatever adversity we have together. And so, even though it's a little silly, I like to talk about like what athletic endeavors, what teams have you involved? It doesn't have to be athletics; it could be debate team, but chess team. But what teams have you been involved in, and how did those manifest themselves? Like, oh, I fucking hated every team member that I've ever had. That's probably a little bit of a red flag there as well. Agree.
I agree. So I would have failed that test because I don't I like tennis. So I would have failed that. But I agree with the fundamental sentiment that you need to start pulling apart, like, what relationships has this person had? Are they married? How's their marriage going? Seriously, how's their marriage? Are they faithful? Are they faithful to their wife or husband?
God, absolutely. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
How do they treat the waitress when you're sitting down having coffee? How do they have empathy? Do they have self-awareness? Those are things that you need to assess straight away. Are they one of the great tests I find for this, actually, now it just popped in my head, is when you start talking about percentages, how you're going to carve up the pie. If they deeply care about it up front without talking about effort, you have the wrong person.
Right.
If they're like, well, I want half. And it's like, well, but like you and I, we talked about the podcast, right? We had these grand visions of monetizing it, which will never happen. But we were talking about, how are we going to be these co-founders together? And it's like, we both said, we're going to split this thing 50-50. We're going to split what we do together 50-50. And we both kind of said, but if you put in more work, we'll renegotiate that. And you said that, like, we both said that. We both were on the same page. And for me, that was like, that's a good sign of a good working relationship. It's like, hey, we don't know what we're going in, but can I trust that we can have the conversation about fairness later?
Yeah.
Critically important. What do you think, Chris?
I think so. Let's just recap, because I think that where we've landed so far is two things. And the second thing is important, but we just glossed over, and I want to get back to it. So the first thing is that trust. You have to have trust. The second thing we've just been able to talk about is the ability to communicate. Can you communicate open and honestly? And that is not always easy in stressful environments. Do you have the sort of relationship where you can sit down across the table from somebody and say, hey, I'm feeling bad about this. I'm feeling frustrated about this. And have the other person not get defensive and not, get angry and, think that they've got the wrong co-founder, but a place where you can be open, honest, and vulnerable, because there is no other place, right? We've said this before in the podcast. You can't go to your wife with those problems, usually, at least my wife, because what she hears is that, your life savings is going to be at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have a place where you can talk to that person openly. But we started talking about the mechanical piece here, and it's something that I think is really important. I want you to discuss, which is, some people call it an operating agreement, but even before an operating agreement, a working agreement. You and I, when we first started doing this, we just sat down and started writing on a piece of paper what this work agreement looks like. And we wrote it down. You and I have done this 1,000 times. But you and I started with a piece of paper and started writing down, saying, okay, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? So talk a little bit about that work agreement, even before you get into this notion of an operating agreement.
It's just an understanding of who's going to do what. It's that simple. Chris, you there? Oh, I lost. How ironic is it that I lost my co-host during a co-founder conversation? All right, so let's see if I can recover this a little bit on my own. This is now I feel lost. Just so everybody out there knows, without Chris, I'm just gonna stare at the screen and do nothing. Chris, come back. Oh man. All right, so I think what Chris was getting to is this understanding up front of how we're going to let me see if I can remove him, and I'm going to add him. Sorry, folks. What happened? I'm getting text. Hold on one second. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Sorry, guys. It's like watching a train wreck, right? So Chris and I came up with this understanding in the podcast. We were going to do some consulting together and to write a book. And Chris, I had this lucky, fortunate understanding of who Chris was before I've been friends with Chris for a while. And when I decided I wanted to do this, I came to Chris fully knowing that I wanted to do it with Chris. Like, it wasn't where I was looking for a co-founder that was going to be a co-host with me. I was like, I want to do this with Chris. And so the operating agreement, or who's going to do what, mapped out really well automatically. So Chris is phenomenal at being a host. He can ask great questions. He understands founders. He loves founders. He has a great network. So I kind of understood what he brought to the table, and I'm really good at product, and I'm really good at the systematizing of things. And so, but we kind of understood that, but we still needed to write it down and have a conversation about who does what and what our goals are, and more importantly, what happens if something goes wrong? How do we handle the hard conversations? And do I trust that Chris, or does Chris trust in me that we're going to handle those difficult components? And what do we do when those things happen? And then it turns into an operating agreement. So the first thing is the first thing that we need to care about is their trust. The second thing is who's going to do what, and divide the workload, if you will. The third, I think that's really important, is you need to build a shared vision. So in 5 years, where do we want this thing together? What, Chris, what do you want out of it? And he asked me, what do you need to see out of this? Why are we doing this? Not just why are we doing this, but why are you doing this? And then decide whether or not you can work with this individual to help them achieve their goals. Again, team before I, right? Us before I is incredibly important with co-founders. And then so now we have this shared vision. We have this understanding of trust, and more importantly, understanding that once trust is broken, it's broken forever. That's the one thing that you can't. That's the non-negotiable. Everything else is negotiable, but the trust piece is non-negotiable. So it's trust, then roles and responsibilities, then it's shared vision. And then maybe you get into legal agreements and trust safeguards, right? So it's almost putting the cart before the horse to talk about an operating agreement when you're just starting out, because you don't really have a good understanding of how you're going to work together and whether or not you can. So I prefer to, in early co-founder relationships, operate without an agreement. And talk about the fact that eventually you're going to need agreement, but we need to work together. We need to map this stuff out. And then once you're in it and you see that there's a business and you see that you guys can work together, it's like, all right, now we need to get this thing formalized. And even then, do you need an attorney? I've found that that really good. I can get a really good operating agreement pulled out from ChatGPT or Gemini. It's just the standard. Just say I need the standard, co-founder agreement. Give me all the paragraphs that you think I need, and then you get a really good template out of it, and then you just tweak it. So you don't even need an attorney until I don't think you need an attorney until you really have a beta product or revenue, or you can see revenue coming in. That's when you really need to have an operating agreement. But getting back to the fundamental question of how do you find a co-founder? So we now know what a good co-founder looks like and how that relationship needs to be structured. But how do you go out and find them? A lot of folks look to family and friends. That is wrought with Chris needs the link. Hold on. He's texting me. He's coming back. So where was I? Totally lost it. Where do you find a co-founder? So finding a co-founder, family and friends, that's what it was. So family and friends can be wrought with, like, if the venture goes sideways, the friendship can go sideways, or family. You cannot speak. I know family members that have started something together and they don't speak to one another because it went south. But family and friends is typically where folks jump in. Let me get Chris on stage. So I've been rambling for 10 minutes.
I mean, I can't wait to hear your wild coaching.
Oh no, it was a train wreck. People have been commenting, this is a train wreck. Please get Chris back.
This is certainly that is not the case. It is my first, and it is one for the record books, my first and catastrophic computer failure right in the middle of an episode. So apologies, Anthony, for you making.
You're back. You're back.
I am.
So I was really trying to dive into where to find co-founders. I started with friends and family, and talked a little bit about how that could be good and really bad.
Yeah, family particularly.
Right. And that can go sideways. So let's talk about other places. So I was going to get into, Chris, places like Denver Founders, where you go find where other entrepreneurial minded folks go hang out, go to meetup, go to meetups locally, go get to virtual events. I was going to say Chamber of Commerce, and then I took that back. That's not where you're going to find a good co-founder.
Probably not, right?
Probably not. But go to an accelerator. Accelerators have happy hours. Go to whatever local in-person events that you can get to that have founder mindset. 1 million cups, Toastmasters, maybe a founders group in your area, a startup ecosystem in your area. If you're in one of the big cities, they're all over the place, but also you can find them on Meetup. Chris, you have some ideas on this too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said was dead right, which is look for opportunities, but there is something behind this which we're not talking about. And the thing behind it is that it requires you to get out and talk to a shit ton of people. And you need to go do that. And you will have to talk to, just like in fundraising and just like any other thing that you do within the startup world, you're going to have to talk to 100 people to find the right person to found a company, particularly early on. As you build your network, as you start to understand, know a lot more people, you'll have a better opportunity to be like, oh, I think that this person who I've really enjoyed talking to and getting to know down through the years. But to do that, you have to show up. There are places like Techstars. There's places like the Founder Institute that I'm kind of tacitly involved in, that are really good at finding people that will help you along that journey. and putting you in front of them. But at the end of the day, you have to go out and do that. You have to show up. You have to talk about your idea. You have to talk about why it matters in the world. And just like anything else, get people excited about that idea, and then go through the steps of seeing whether or not you can actually have a co-founder relationship.
I think that, and I'll give a little shout out to another accelerator group called Antler. They have a really interesting model where the first 3 weeks, they just bring on people that are really good at building relationships and people that are technical. And so their whole model is bring founders in a room for a while and let them mix it up and find their co-founders. So they kind of do speed dating for founders. Some of the founders they bring in already have an idea, and a lot of them don't. They're just like, I just want to start a company, and they put them together and they mingle them for a while and shake things up to see if some good co-founder relationships come out of. I also want to say, you don't have to, especially early stage, and a lot of, I don't think it's necessarily that you have to have an idea to go find a co-founder. You can go find people that you're like, I want to start a business with these folks, and you can do a lot of trial runs. You can say, let's try to start this software business, or let's try to start this service business together, and do little, dip your toe in and just see if you guys are going to work. And you can, this happened to me just recently. I did that with somebody, a technical co-founder that was looking for a go-to-market person. And we got working together, and I'm like, I just don't love the product you're building. I think it's a cool product, but I don't love it. I don't love this space that you're going into. I don't have any passion around it. Let me help you find somebody to take my place. So you can do stuff like that where you get into it with somebody, just have a radically candid conversation, say, this isn't for me. It's perfectly fine to do that. You're not stuck. Help them move along, and then go find your next thing. Anyway, I'll stop talking and let you jump in, Chris.
No, I think it's a good thing. So, I mean, to recap kind of where we've been so far is, number one is that, and without knowing what rambling diatribe that you had while I was, dealing with,
it was a train wreck.
So the pieces that we have is, number one is trust is critically important. Finding people, so understanding, taking an inventory of your strengths and weaknesses, making sure that you know what you're bringing to the table, having an open and honest communicative relationship whereby you can communicate openly when things stop feeling good, whatever. Then, as we're going through that, going out and starting to look for people, I think it's a terrific idea. There's two examples. One is a company here in Denver called Full Contact. Guy Bartler, a terrific founder, founded that company. It was a group of people in search of an idea, and they went through 3 or 4 different ideas before they found Full Contact. Really, really good, interesting approach. They worked together before, had a tremendous amount of trust in that relationship. And then when they went forward, they found the right idea for their team. The other kind of more conventional way, I think, is to find people that are aligned on a single passion, vision, etc. It doesn't have to be both of our passions, but you do need to be excited about solving the problem. Because if you're not excited about solving that problem, it's going to be a long, hard grind of you sitting on the coattails of somebody else's vision or mission there. All right, so we've got that. We've talked a little bit about this idea of creating a working agreement. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What are the steps as you're starting? You mentioned that you went through a relationship, started with somebody. What are the steps that you go through to vet the relationship? Because I think that the thing that you and I do differently than just about anybody else is that we're going to date before we get married. Like we will spend time with our co-founders now. We'll work together for a while before we actually take that step of legally founding a company together. What are you looking for during those steps?
Yeah, I like this idea of dating before you get married, and committing to put more in than you're going to get out at first. So I like to, one of the things I like to do as a test is really over deliver up front. and see how that over deliver is either reciprocated or appreciated. It's a small thing, but it does work really well. It's like, I'm going to put more into this than I think that my co-founder is, just to see how they react to it. And do they step up? Do they lean out? Do they abdicate? Just let me take over? Like, how does over delivering happen? It also kind of sets up the relationship. Like, all right, let's set the pace to get like this. I'm going to set the pace, right? And see how they react to that. And then, but vetting, I've heard, here's the problem I have with that question, Chris, and that is it becomes manipulative. You can get manipulative really quick by setting up false tests to see if this person's going to react in certain ways. I've seen co-founders like introduce obstacles or problems just to see how the other person reacts. And fundamentally, you're not trusting. Like, in order to get trust, you have to give it. And that's not showing trust when you're setting up these false obstacles or false narratives. Like, for example, dropping off of a podcast on purpose just to see how the other person
just to see what happens.
Just to see what happens.
I think it was the best possible time for me to drop off when we were talking about trust. It's like trust, and be like, so
during a co-founder conversation, my co-host drops off, and I'm like, "Oh, perfect example."
Right,
I should have leaned into it a little bit better than I did.
We could have just said it was all planned.
Yeah,
would be like, "Oh, well, this was."
Well, I'm curious, Chris. So you talked about date versus married. You know, start dating before you get married. How do you vet folks? What's is it just time? Is there anything other than just time together?
We're working on projects together. So even if you don't, let's say that it's easier in a services business. So if we're thinking about starting let's say a consulting business together, and you and I are thinking about co-founding this consulting business, and we think that we want to work together in this business. The obvious thing for us to do is for me to bring you in on a consulting project I'm doing. Even if you're just being like, hey, look, I can't really pay you, but will you come in and help me on this project, to see how we work together, to see actually what you bring to the table, to see when we are actually in front of a client, do you step on my toes? Do I step on yours? Am I able to give you the space? What are you delivering of value there? So try to mirror the actual work that you're going to be doing. Not always easy, but I've seen it done really well also with technical co-founders working on an open source project. Just being like, hey, let's dive in. Let's build a feature together. And let's just see how it goes and see how things work. It does go a little bit against this notion of complementary skills, where I want you to go out, I want to sit behind a computer and code, and I want you to go sell. Go hang out with that person for a day as they're in a coffee shop, and just see how their meetings go and see how their interactions go. It doesn't have to be formal, but as much time as you can spend seeing how that person works. The other thing is, I don't know how to fabricate this, Anthony, and you are dead right. You can't fake it. There has to be some sort of a stressful environment to see how the person reacts under stress, because most people will react entirely different in stressful situations, and you're signing up to be in a very stressful environment.
You can. So we did this, Chris. You can do that by setting an unarbitrary deadline to get something done. Right. So we did this naturally with How to Founder by saying, all right, we're going to really lean into Denver Startup Week. And we decided that like 8 weeks before it started.
Yeah.
And so you and I were like, all right, we're gonna set this impossible thing that we're gonna try to do to lean into it and really pour energy into it together. So you can find like an event that you want to go to announce your product, or get to an alpha stage of the product, or land your first client by a certain date. So give your team, give your venture a deadline that's hairy and difficult, possible but not easy, and then see how you guys both react to it. First of all, if there's a pushback on the deadline, on the arbitrary deadline, that's a problem, right? Well, why does it have to be December 1st? Why can't it be December? Why? Like, well, because we're trying to see how we're going to work together under a stressful environment. If that person doesn't want to do it, you got the wrong co-founder. Like, if they want it to be easy, you have the wrong co-founder.
I think it's a great point.
Yeah.
I think so. We've got a few steps here. So, what additional things, what do I need to think about? And so I think that one of the places where it falls down is we always talk about communication, how you and I work together in stress. There's a level of self-awareness here that you have to take into account that is not always easy to do. It's a lot of people think they want to be startup founders until they get into it and then they realize it's not for them. What are some things you suggest, either structurally or just conversationally? What are those touch points along the way early on, particularly to say, are we still aligned? Are we still thinking this is the right relationship for us?
Yeah, so Chris, you tried to do this with us, right? Where you're like, we're gonna do a monthly check-in. We haven't done one.
But you and I talk for 6 hours a week together.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? It's like, it's natural for us. It's a natural part of our conversation. Hey, where are you at? How you doing? It's like I would say we're friends first.
Yeah.
Co-founder second. So for us, it's natural. And if you can't see yourself being friends with your co-founder, you probably have the wrong co-founder. Well, but you're talking about those like, how do you do those check-ins? I think the conversation you had was a really good one, and I think it's a good model. It's like, all right, here's how we're structured. Here's how we're going to set this thing up. We set that who does what, like, early on. And then you said, all right, and we're going to check in every 30 days to make sure that this still lines up. Now, we haven't had to do it because we decided we were going to do it. Doesn't mean that we have to do it, because it's like, yeah, things are looking like they should be looking. When something changes, hey, something's changed. We need to take a pivot here. We need to do this, or we want to get better. So we're kind of driving each other back and forth on a semi-monthly basis, sometimes a weekly basis, just to make things better.
So you and I do that just naturally. We talk after almost every podcast, talking about what's gone well and what we could do better. In this case, you'll be like, please stay on the freaking podcast. But I need to
have some show notes so I can talk in case you drop off.
So I do think it's important, and it's something that I've seen investors look for along the way, which is, do you have a regular cadence of check-ins of just not always just about the business, but about where are you in life? And it gets very, very busy, and it gets really hard to occasionally just check in. And I just remember one time early on, I was really struggling with a lot of decisions in my life. And you just called me and said, "How you doing, man?" It's like, I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to check in with you. And I did. I needed checking in with at that moment. I was frustrated and anxious and scared, none of which really had to do with you at all, or even the business. It was just a moment where it was a human moment. And so having either informal or formal communication set up, I think, is really, really important along the way.
And then on that, you should have one of the things that you set up, Chris, was, all right, here's essentially the pillars that we decide to stop on, right? It's like,
the break point.
Here's where you quit. Yeah. Here's where we know this isn't working, and setting those things up. But we're still, Chris, we're dancing around finding. We haven't really underscored, how do you find the we're talking about the 5 strategies for finding the right co-founders, and we have come up with maybe 2. Is it really that hard? Can we come up with 5?
I think so. So the places. So we've talked about what do you do to find if they're right, and then where to find them. So where to find them. If you have no idea where to find them, you hit on some. Number 1 is any startup meetup. Now, you and I are startup junkies. If you and I were founding something that required Ruby on Rails, both you and I would go to every Ruby on Rails meetup in Denver, despite the fact that you and I don't code Ruby on Rails. You show up in the place where the skill set that you're looking for to round out the team. If I was a technical person and I wanted to find a marketing or sales co-founder, I would go show up at the marketing, the Creative Tuesdays or whatever those things are. So look for the non-obvious places. The second is another one that's a little bit strange. Go to colleges and universities. CU Denver, CU Boulder, basically every college and university has some sort of an entrepreneurship center. Go hang out. There are directors of those centers that's job is to connect other people to be like, hey, I'm looking for this. I'm looking for this. Sometimes they're alumni, sometimes they're current students, et cetera. College and universities tend to be a really, really rich source of talent, whether co-founder talent, et cetera. Any of there are co-founder related, find a co-founder meetups. There are the thing you talked about with Antler. Those are incredible opportunities to go do that. I think the ones that we're getting to, and the most important ones, is go through LinkedIn and any previous job that you've had where you said, man, that person was sharp and we worked together incredibly well. Go through and look at your previous colleagues in any job. And it could be any job. It could be one that you worked construction or manual labor, whatever that is, to try to find those people that you connected with and that you felt like you could trust, and then just go have coffee with them along the way. So that's 4. I'll give you the 5th. What's the 5th? Give me one more secret.
So I can't remember the name of the organization, but there's this group in Colorado that works exclusively with veterans that want to be founders.
Oh yeah, that's Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs, terrific organization.
Yeah. So go find veterans. Make great co-founders.
Tremendous entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a 5th. And there are likely 1,000 more that we're not hitting. The real thing that you're looking for is you need to create your own luck here by finding the right co-founder. You need to just be active in the community, talking about what you're doing, looking foolish in front of friends and family, because you may not talk directly with your next co-founder, but you might be talking to somebody that knows that person.
Absolutely. And the being top of mind piece. I think the reason why we both struggle with this is that both you and I have used this analogy in the past, which is finding a co-founder is a little bit like getting married. And so where do you find a spouse? You find a spouse where you find somebody that shares your interests, likes. If you love volleyball, you find a spouse playing volleyball. If if you're a person of faith, you find that person in whatever community of faith that you go to. And so it's very similar. You can't just say, here's the place where you go to find your spouse. You have to put yourselves in those environments where you're likely to find people that share your values.
And there is no Match.com for co-founders.
There's not. I was just thinking that's Pivot the company.
No, that's a terrible business idea. That's a terrible business idea.
What I will say is that it's so much of this conversation underlying it, and it's something we've talked a ton about, Anthony, which is values. As a potential founder of a company, the first thing I need to do is sit down and define my values. What do I care about? Thank you for this. I think it's Drew, because our technical incompetency is on full display today. But you need to sit down and look at yourself in the mirror and say, here are the things that are most important to me in my life. And here are the places where I'm willing to risk. I call that a personal risk profile when I'm talking to early stage founders. You can do whatever you want. You can just write it down on a sticky note if you want. But you need to have breakpoints along the way for you personally. And then you need to be able to share those with your co-founder and say, hey, look, the moment I blow through my savings, I'm done. I got to go get another job. I'm not mortgaging my house to go do this. And that's a fair conversation to have with a co-founder. Agree with that?
100%. Yeah, I think there's this notion of what I have written down, Chris, is shared risk. You need to both be risking something.
Oh man, you want to talk about something that is completely demoralizing as a founder is if you start a company and you're risking your life savings and then you find out that they're like, they're fine. They're independently wealthy, or mom and dad are paying for it or something.
That's not, I don't care about that as much as it needs to be shared. I know what you're saying though. It's like, there's this other value attribute that you need in a founder, and that's hunger. Right. And if somebody's comfortable and they don't need it, and they don't have this internal fire to build, you have the wrong co-founder. You're talking about shared hunger. Well, there needs to be shared risk.
If I am somebody, when things get hard and I've bet my family, my future, my career on this, and I find along the way that actually, you don't have the same burn the boats mentality, that's a misalignment. And that's something you can solve with a conversation up front. Yeah,
and you don't need a burn the boats mentality to start a company, despite what Peter T will tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
But it needs to be equal. And it doesn't even need to be equal. But it needs to be shared. It needs to. Right. So and it doesn't even need to be financial. Are you both willing to share in looking silly or looking foolish? Are you both willing to share in going out and doing uncomfortable things, in equal components? So you just need to have this notion of it being fair, not just from a piece of the pie perspective, but fair from what am I willing to risk about my reputation, my ego, my network, and capital and effort. So all of those things matter.
We have beat this horse dead, Anthony.
Yeah.
Tell me what you've learned today. I have no show notes in front of me now that I'm on a different machine. So you're gonna have to take us home. What did you learn today? What are our takeaways from this conversation?
The takeaway. So we were talking about finding the right co-founder. So let's talk about finding first and then the right second. So I think we've kind of covered it, and there's nothing really new. There's no real aha moment here. You need to network. You need to network more, and Chris and I will tell you this. You need to network in person first. You need to be face to face. See the person in the eye. Get a sense of who this person is. LinkedIn doesn't do it. LinkedIn is good if the in-person stuff doesn't work, or at least LinkedIn is good to help you find places to go in person, right?
Or if you live in Antarctica.
Or if you live in Antarctica, if you have it's a fallback if you don't have places to go to, but you have to meet people in person. Shared interest is a great place to start, volleyball, church, etc. But entrepreneurial is probably better, and even more specific skill set meetups that are where you're looking for a specific skill set. All right, so that's where you find. Now, how do you find the right person? Let's get into right trust. If you can't trust the person, they're not going to be a good co-founder. You have to decide who does what early and make sure that you can get aligned there very quickly. You need to decide on a shared vision. By the way, both who does what and the shared vision, those are going to change. They not only can they change, they likely will change. Complementary skills can be rocket fuel, but is not a requirement. You need to have shared risk and shared hunger. Very critical in a co-founder. And the last piece I'll put on it, and this goes with trust, values matter. Their values matter. And the fact that you need to have values alignment. If you don't want to take advantage of your customers and your co-founder does because they're in it for the money, you have the wrong value system and you're not going to align further on. So you need to have, in bluntly, there may not be, it doesn't mean they have bad values. It just means that you see the world differently and you need to see the world the same in order for it to work. Chris, why don't you take us into the deep dives?
I mean, I think it's incredibly well said. And since I don't have show notes, I'm going to ask you to do deep dives for us.
Oh yeah, I sent them to you. Okay.
I can look at my phone, but go ahead.
Oh, got it. All right, so we've got the Theory of Growth of the Firm by Edith Penrose, Competitive Advantage by Michael Porter, E-Myth Revised by Michael Gerber, The Founder's Dilemmas by Noam Wasserman. And then there's some great articles on the First Round Review, Secret to Great Co-Founder Relationships, and the Startup Therapy podcast is also great. Do you have any other that are coming to the top of your head, Chris?
I think I've read the Wasserman book, and I think that the Porter stuff, the Porter stuff is terrific. The one other thing I just want to add, and I don't know that we've covered this, which is there needs to be an expectation throughout the entire part that you are building a relationship with somebody. It doesn't just happen. And just like you need to work on the relationship with your spouse, just like you need to show up for your friends when if you want to stay friends with them, you got to help them move, right? It's the same thing. You have to continue to work and build that relationship over time.
If I can add one more note to that, Chris, it's not just that person, it's their family. So if I'm having a problem with my wife or my kids, you know about it, Chris. Like, yeah. and it's like, and you got to care about that. You have to literally care about the other person that you're developing a co-founder relationship with, and care about that at a personal level. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. All right. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for what I think is a good episode.
I think it was too.
Except for the 5 minutes where I rambled.
Of a technical episode.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Remember to find us on howtofounder.com. You can listen to us and subscribe to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, all of those. howtofounder.com. The next episode that we have is called Our Ideas Are Easy, Execution is Hard. And we have a guest, John Cousins, who's like, he has a bunch of degrees, MIT, like he has a bunch of pedigree degrees and a lot of great startups under his belt. I'm really looking forward to chatting with John next week. Chris, Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year. I'm going to charge my computer. So
all right. Take care, guys. Thank you.